Mina. How are you?
Good.
Nice.
How are you? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. Oh my God. So, interestingly enough, I accidentally started the live stream early
Oh no, that's
instead of,
okay.
yeah, instead of like creating a new live stream. I was like, you know what? Let's run with it and flow the divine feminine way. So, oh my God, you look amazing, first of all.
Thank
The
you. You
purple just
too. Thank
gorgeous
you.
on you, and the red background, all of it. It's just so beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to be doing this. Thank you for joining us. Let me pull up my
I'm
stuff
gonna go
here,
get my
ladies.
book
Yeah, go
real
for it. No
quick.
worries.
So I have it in case we need to show
Oh my
it.
God, yes. Yes. Yes, we're going to be
Yay.
using the book. So, ladies, thank you so much for joining us and for your patience waiting here. Um, we are both so excited. I know Mina has been talking tons about the book and doing all of these lives. So, super excited. Let's see. Let's start with first letting us know that you can hear us. Hi, Amanda. Hi, Angel. So happy to see you both here. Let us know that you can see us, that you can hear us. And for the ladies that have the book, before we get started with our electrifying conversation, I would love to know what you have gotten from the book so far. So as we're getting set up here, let us know in the chat what you have gotten from us, from the book so far. Mina, how are you? I am like over the moon excited to have this conversation with you. Um, for those of you who don't know, Mina is a wonderful inspiration to me and to many thousands of women across the world, like literally thousands, and who knows, maybe even millions, given like how many views your videos have gotten over the years. She teaches about femininity, men, marriage, money, and God from the perspective of her culture, academic studies, and spiritual experience. Ladies are saying they can see us and hear us great. So that's wonderful. Desiree's book is arriving in a week. Love that. We're going to speak about feminine power and legacy and what it takes to create and manifest the life of your dreams and having it all. So let's jump in. And of course, we're going to read some really powerful passages from our official Universe Guru textbooks. So, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, grab your textbooks. Those of you who have yet to order it, there's a link for it in the chat, and all of Mina's details are in the description box. So, let's start with the dedication, which is on page 7. So, I wonder if that happened coincidentally or purposefully, but the fact that it's number 7. So the dedication on page 7 reads, to 7 generations back and 7 generations forward, for Sheena and Alina, for us. So Sheena being your late mom and Alina being your beautiful daughter. So when I read this, I think of your legacy. So when I think of also like the biggest household names in the personal development space, spirituality, scientists, they all firmly stand for something. So I would love to start with that topic and then melt into some of the other yummy topics that we have. Um, when you think of your life or just you, Mina Irfan, and especially when you think of what you are passing down to your children in terms of men, money, marriage, spirituality, what does Mina Irfan stand for?
Thank you, Eileen, first and foremost, for having me here today. And oh my God, I did not know that that was page 7. Like, I have chills right now looking at that. It's so weird. There's been so many strange things like that with the book where it's just been like magic after magic that we didn't plan for. So I have chills because no one on my team, like, no one noticed that. So thank you for noticing and pointing that out, that ended up being on page 7. Um, my legacy is that you get to heal, and no matter what, our bloodline gets to win. I come from, generations of trauma and like women sacrificing themselves and women struggling. And everyone told the next generation that I'm struggling because of you. I'm struggling for you. But it didn't feel like I grew up hearing from my mom that everything we're doing is for you. but like we didn't feel like we were a number one priority. Like growing up, there was this so much trauma. There was so much like toxic giving to other people. There was so much people pleasing. And so one, it awakened guilt and shame in me that like, oh my God, my parents have to struggle because of me. I'm a burden. And then I wasn't really a number one priority. Like I have, you guys read in the book, like all of this trauma. So then my grandmother's story was the same. And then when I asked my grandmother about her mom, it like became clear that like everyone sacrificed for them for this like future like generation that like also sacrificed themselves. So I'm like, this is some nasty ass pyramid scheme where like no one gets to win. Like who, at least in a pyramid scheme, the big Joe at the top gets to win and he gets to be rich, right? I'm like, who is that person that like had a good life because other people sacrificed themselves for them? And what I wanted most in my childhood, like the number one thing, and even in my adulthood, was for my mom to be happy. Like I can count on one hand those few moments where my mom genuinely seemed rested and happy, you know? So putting all of that together, I realized that the biggest gift that I can give my future generations is my own happiness. I want my children to have a role model of what a happy, content, successful person looks like in their own life, in their relationships, their relationship with money, their relationship with the pleasure, their relationship with their body, their relationship with their work. Like, if I'm not going to give them that blueprint, who are they going to get that from? Like this is their best training ground because I get to have access to them like 24/7 for a set number of years, right? And whatever those years are, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 25, like who knows, right? So after that, if they're living on their own, they're not really going to get to see me on a day to day. They're not going to see my moods. They're not going to see, how I do things. So I decided that I was going to be the legacy line breaker. And I was going to say, thank you, ancestors, thank you for your sacrifices. I'm gonna be the one where they're looking and they're like, oh fuck, she was worth it. Because no one's been able to say that. No one's like our ancestors wasn't aren't looking at my mom and saying she was worth it. Like she sacrificed herself too. So I broke the legacy of sacrifice. And magically, like, everyone started respecting me more, caring for me more, admiring me more, like all the things that all my ancestors wanted, I got by being the line breaker. So my children get to have a juicy, delicious, fun, happy, pleasure-filled mother, and that's my greatest gift for them. That's their inheritance, really.
Ah, yes. And what a beautiful inheritance, because what better feeling than to grow up with a mother who's present, who's loving, and who is loving to herself. And they get to see that example of you living out your desires, you living your best life, as they say. And that gives them permission and the embodiment of what it means to do the same. So that's so beautiful. And especially for your daughter, who is a woman just like you, and she's growing up watching you flourish continuously every single year, more and more and more. And it's just like, I'm sure, beautiful for her to see and be a part of. I remember in one of the recent lives that you did, you mentioned your daughter and the regular feminine outings that you guys have, and how you guys were chatting about legacy, inheritance, business, having a very sweet and intellectual. And your daughter is how old? 7 or 8 years old?
She's 9. She'll be 10 in January. So yeah, she's
Yeah.
9.
And you guys had a sweet and intellectual conversation about inheritance and legacy. And the question I want to ask around that is, in your heart, what does it mean for you to be able to pass that happy, content wisdom or embodiment to your daughter, Alina?
Oh my God, it's everything. It's everything because without that, what is anything else worth? Like if you're not happy, relationships don't even matter. Money doesn't matter. Like, nothing matters if you're not really content and happy. And it brings me so much joy when Alina's was born into like us having these conversations, and it's like the culture of our home. And when she was 4, I really keenly became aware that she's absorbing everything because she would repeat things. Like she would hear, Like let's say that I'm hanging out with one of my friends and my friend says something about, oh, I hate my legs or whatever. And she would be four and she would say, you shouldn't talk to yourself like that. Or when my friend would leave, she would say, I can't believe that she was saying that about her. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's picking up because she's never, in her reality, she never knew that people talk to themselves that way because all she hears is her mom loving on herself and loving on her. So it was like she was like, why would she said that say that about her legs? And then when she went to school, she would come home and tell me stories of, my friend was saying that I told her, you shouldn't say that about your body. Like this is your body. You have to love your body. And so being born into this culture of our home where we don't do that kind of we don't talk like that, she became aware of the contrast, and I love those moments where I'm like, oh, she's absorbing everything, it's registering, it's just part of who she is now.
Right. Yeah, it's like deeply ingrained in her DNA, I would imagine, like just her ability to see that and be programmed into a far more evolved way of being than many, many, many people get to experience in this lifetime. So, what a beautiful, beautiful gift and legacy that you're passing on to your children. So, big, big, big heart to you for passing that on to them. And I want to make a connection between the word your legacy, that legacy, and two concepts that I feel you embody and teach so beautifully, and that's both savage and surrender. So at the end of the book, you mentioned that female power is both internal strength and fortitude, which to me is like the savage, and external softness, which to me is like the surrender. Um, so let's read page 51. And I was debating whether or not to read this because it's a pretty deep passage. So I'll leave it up to you. Is it okay if I read anything from the book, no matter how?
Go for it, go for it.
Okay. Because if otherwise I would read something else. But one of the passages here on page 51 and chapter womb wounds for those with the Kindle version, um, it says, the day Sheena passed, only days before her 50th birthday, I was 8 months pregnant with my second son, placed on bed rest because of a complicated pregnancy. In the deepest grief of my life, Sheena's family, the ones she supported her entire life, called me. I thought it was a call acknowledging our collective immense loss. Instead, they called to confirm I would continue sending them money now that my mother couldn't. And wow, like how deep is that? How deep is that? I had tears welling up in my eyes as I was reading this chapter because I'm sure so many of us have either experienced or witnessed our parents experience such things. And sometimes I feel like sometimes people don't quite understand how much you have seen with your eyes and how much you have lived through. And I know, like, when you have a good heart, and you even mentioned this in the book, like, when you have a good heart and seeing what you have seen, you need to, by necessity, develop this kind of layer of protection. So remember in this chapter, you mentioned, like, this is where the first layer of your personal savage awakening happened. So I would love to talk a little bit about savage. What does savage mean to you from both a spiritual perspective and a practical perspective?
Oh my goodness, yes, so deep. I realized that the good, kind people in my family died early, just giving themselves, giving themselves. And the other people, they were also good people. They didn't do this kind of stuff to other people, but they took advantage of the people that allowed themselves to be taken advantage of. And so watching this play out, and then when I went to Northwestern University, I ended up studying all of these various topics about evolution, anthropology, psychology. I even spent a whole year studying predators. And I wasn't thinking about this at the time, but now that I look back, I wonder if I sought out the whole trainings about predators because of the childhood abuse I went through. And maybe there was a part of me that was like, looking for answers. I wonder about that now. It wasn't in my conscious awareness that I'm doing it because of that, but something led me to study this. And, you know, every single predator that was like a lot of these studies were based on like convicted, serial killers and rapists and like the worst of the worst men that were basically waiting to be executed. And there were journalists that went in and got to interview them before they were gone because they wanted to learn everything they could. And all of them, watching video after video, all of them had this really, like, I remember just like being so disturbed and having chills. I have chills even now when I'm talking about it because it awakened me so much. They all said that the question was, how do you choose your victims? And that was a repeated question in the interviews. And the answer across all of these men was so eerily similar. It's not like they like got together and decided this. It was like coming from a very like almost animalistic way, like predatory way, is that they choose their victims based on trauma. They said that they can smell and see trauma on people. They can see who's coming from a broken family, who's coming from a weak family, and who's like alone and lonely and broken. And those are the people that they like to prey on. And when I started putting all of these pieces together, like seeing, my mom and my other ancestors, my dad too, he got taken advantage of his entire life. And he died with a lot of resentment that like no one appreciated him and all of this stuff. They gave so much of themselves and they never got anything back for it. And people just took advantage of them and then they died. And then studying DNA and being able to look at evolution, I'm like, oh my God, one day the predators are going to outnumber the good, kind, spiritual people because all the spiritual community keeps telling us is love and light and oneness and turn the other cheek. And that's all great when you're alive. Okay. You're worth nothing dead. Okay. My mom always turned the other cheek. She's fucking dead. Okay. She's good for no one now. So how is that going to help us? And so the savage part is something that I borrowed from the predators, but it's a sacred savage. It's learning how they thrive and they protect themselves and no one goes after them, right? But they come after us. So the savage part of you does your inner work, heals yourself, creates this field of protection where they overlook you. They're not looking at us. They're going for the wounded people. It's like a shark that can smell blood in the water and then goes off after the one that's bleeding and she'll ignore the one that she can't smell. Be the one that predators can't smell. So when you create this field, you not only protect yourself, you protect your children, you protect your family unit, and then what if your field is so strong that the predators not only skip your house, but they skip four houses in every direction because they're like, oh my God, there's no, we're not even seeing them. Let's go for someone else. This is not going to be an easy prey. And so you create this field where the predators are scared of you.
That's powerful. That's so powerful. And I love what you said at the beginning too, where sometimes these are good people, like good-hearted people, but we awaken this something inside of them that makes them open to taking advantage of that. It's like allowing them to continue to take, and not realizing that that's doing anything to you. It's not realizing it's depleting you, draining you, that you're just not in a place to give that. But because you're giving, they'll continue to take and things like that. So I really love that you mentioned that. Sometimes these are good people. We are just awakening something within them. And that's the same way, like that savagery gets awakened within us when we got to the point where enough is enough, where you feel like you're done with living that life of overgiving, of being taken advantage of, and all of that. So I love that. And a couple of the things you mentioned in the book that to me felt like very practical to take away from how to be savage is boundaries. And these are concepts that to me are don't seem very like people wouldn't necessarily call them savage, but you have to be able to be savage internally, is what I get, to be able to create those boundaries from a place of strength and hold them. So the savagery is almost like this energy you run through your body in order to bring about the boundaries in a very strong way. And your other concept, be a fish once. So to me, those are like two really great practical things that I personally took away from how to be savage. So can you talk a little bit about both of those, boundaries and being a fish once? Because I think they kind of go hand in hand.
They do. Funny story before I get into that. The person we added to officially edit this book, we had, someone that we just kind of like took on, and then my assistant did like three more edits. But she didn't know me. She doesn't know my work. She doesn't know my YouTube channel. I'm sure she edits a lot of manuscripts. And so while she was reading this book, she kept stopping at her editing and emailing me saying, "Oh my God, this is life-changing. I love this." So it's so interesting to see someone engaging with those concepts that don't know who I am. So they're not like, I feel like my women, like my students, there's a sense of love and pair bonding between us because we've been working together for so long. We've been sharing, we're vulnerable, we've been helping each other. And so like, of course you guys are gonna resonate. It's almost like a sister bond between us. But someone that doesn't know my work and that comes and she's like, I'm gonna start using this right away. So that was a very interesting to see how these concepts, other people engage with them. So what would happen in my life, Eileen, and which was it's driving me crazy, is that people would continuously break my boundaries. And from hint, a spoiler alert, I didn't freaking have any boundaries. I just thought people were breaking my boundaries. There was no internal boundary setting. And I had this habit of like bitching to everyone. So like someone would like break my boundary and then I would go to my friends or whatever and be like, "Oh my God, look at this. Like I can't like they should know better, blah blah blah, all this stuff." Meanwhile, not actually setting boundaries with the original person. And the advice I would get back would be like, "Well, you should sit them down and like have a conversation with them." So I would try that. And what would happen every single time is I would sit these people down and have a conversation about them breaking my imaginary boundaries, to which they would counter, and the conversation would turn to me feeling guilty for having boundaries and giving them more. So they would like turn the entire thing around. And so, for example, if I was upset that someone, took $500 from me without my permission, I'd leave the conversation having given them 2,000, like, and then feeling guilty about the whole thing. And they would just twist it and manipulate it. And so I got to a point where I was like, the next person that tells me to sit down and have a conversation with someone is going to get punched in the face, because like I'm going to be in jail because like I can't stand, like this is not working. And so there was this one moment where this one particular person just kept boundary after boundary after boundary, and I love this person. So like I was just allowing it and then bitching to my husband about him, bitching to my oldest son who was very young at the time, like about this person. And I could see there was this one moment where my husband and my oldest son exchanged glances. It was just a split second. And I was like, what? Like, there was something about it that made me aware that somehow they think it's my fault. And
Mhm.
like it was, and they're like nothing, like they didn't necessarily say anything, but it was enough where it was a huge awakening moment for me, and it snapped me at least out of the complaining and venting mode, because I was like, that was really odd, what does that mean, right? It was like they were in agreement of something that I didn't know. So that moment I decided that I was going to do everything that this person was doing to me to them to see how they reacted. So this person would show up at my house unannounced on a busy day where I had stuff going on, and I would drop everything, take care of them, spend 8 hours cooking for them, feeding them, entertaining them, and then they would usually leave very angry. Like, let's say 8 hours later, I have to go pick up my kids from school. They would storm out saying, "You never have time for me." When I dropped the entire day, spent 8 hours with them, went to the grocery store, bought things, took them to the grocery store with me because I can't leave them them in my house, came back, cook for them their favorite meal, but I can't leave my kids stranded. Like I have to go pick up my kids. And so I showed up at their house unannounced. Guess what happened? They didn't open the door. I could hear them inside, but they didn't open the door. And I left so excited. I was like, oh my God, because I was like learning something. So I did all the things, called them at 2 a.m. with a made up emergency, like all these kind of things that they were doing to me. And every single time, they simply did not participate. They didn't entertain, they didn't answer the call, they didn't open the door. And this was such a huge life like revelation to me. So if you want to learn how to be savage, instead of being upset by predators, freaking study them. They have it down pat. They have it down pat. Because they knew how to take advantage of the situation, they also knew all the things I was doing wrong. They studied me. I didn't study me. So I started implementing all of those things back, and it was a complete reset. Complete reset. And then I started realizing, oh my God, boundaries don't need to be discussed. Boundaries are not about the other person. Boundaries are about me. The only boundary I need to set is with myself. And this was years ago, probably close to a decade. Yeah, close to a decade ago. And I have never, like, I would say from that point, maybe 1% of the time I've had to discuss a boundary with someone. And usually it's a child that's just curious. But with adults, nope. It's like problem solved. It's just this internal owning of what you're available for and what you're not available for. It's as simple as that. And that has been one of the biggest revelations for me. And so that's where the boundaries work in this comes from. You don't, the whole sitting people down and talk, that would be like me saying, trying to reason with a tiger that's trying to eat me. They're predatory by nature, right? Like it's not gonna work. It's gonna end up him eating me. Like this is not gonna go well. The be a bitch ones is a concept in my culture. Obviously, they don't use words like that. I come from a very proper culture, but it loosely translates into be bad ones.
Mm.
And how they explain this concepts, our elders, is that if you are trying to be nice, you're gonna have to be bad so many times because people will push their limits. They're going to push their limits. The saying, you give them a finger, they'll take a hand kind of thing. And I've experienced this. I would move people into my home temporarily, who were like homeless or going through a tough time, like family and friends, and they would break boundary after boundary after boundary, and I would have to correct them and correct them and correct them, and they would say, "Stop being a bitch, Mina," or like, so what if I spilled this, or so what if I was, I brought this person over, like stop being that way. Why are you so uptight? This is my freaking house. These are my fucking rules, right? And so then when I started implementing this, I'm like, you know what? If I just said one no the first time, I would be still considered a bad person, but it would just be once. When I say yes, I'm a bad person like 20 different times. So if I'm going to be a bad person anyways, I might as well be a bad person the first time around. And I became known as, in my extended family, the selfish one. And I love that because no one comes and asking for like stuff. They only come if they actually want a solution to something. I won't give you money. I'll teach you how to make money. Because you happen to be related to me, I'll do that for you. I'll tell you how to make millions. I won't move you into my house. I'll show you how you can have a paid off property so you never have to be homeless again. They don't want those kind of solutions because that requires work. They want handouts, and I'm not going to do that. I don't do handouts.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of person that if I see a panhandler versus someone selling 25-cent newspapers and I don't read the freaking newspaper, I'll give the newspaper person $100 and not a penny to the panhandler. Because you're looking for a handout versus you're working. I will support the people that work.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I really, really love what you said at the very beginning with your husband and your son. They both looked at each other, kind of knowing what's going on here. And that led you to being able to, one, reflect on yourself to see what's going on within me, and two, take personal responsibility, which is another key concept that I've seen across your work from like the beginning of you sharing your work. So taking personal responsibility. And then I also really, really, really love that you said when you see predators, don't get mad at them, study them, observe them, because there's so much you can learn from what they are doing, the tactics they are using, the mindsets that they have, and they are embodied in their savagery. They are embodied in their predatory nature. And what better people to learn how to be savage than from the savages themselves? But of course, in our nature, we already have that loving spirit, that good heart.
Exactly.
So it's not like we'll become full savage or full predators. We'll just be able to create those layers of protection, which, yeah, I absolutely love, 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 love. Like the stories you share that really bring out what that can look like. And yeah, I really, really, really love that. And there was something else that you said. It just, as soon as I said what I just said right now, it just completely escaped me. But, oh, here it was. So you mentioned like when you were kind and you said yes, then you had to say no multiple other smaller times because they were breaking your boundaries little by little by little by little. But all of those little moments of you being bad, saying, having to say no after you said the big yes, all accumulate to probably equal, if not more, of you being bad had you not just said no in the first place. So it's interesting how that works. Trying to be nice in the end accumulates to far more savage or badness coming out of you than had you just done the thing from the beginning. I love that. So is there anything you want to say about that before we jump into the
Yeah,
next
I
thing?
do. First I want to say that I know the kind of person I am and the people that I deal with, my students, my clients, they can't be evil if they freaking tried. Like if their life depended on it, they can't be evil, right? And that's why I talked about in this book that when you apply savage to sacred, to kindness, to love, to compassion, it balances us out. We're not gonna suddenly, like nothing I'm teaching you is suddenly gonna turn you into, a predator. It's just going to offer you a layer of protection because I know who I'm working with, right? Predatory people don't need this book because they're embodied in that. Like they never, they don't need that. They've got that. But us, kind-hearted, nice people pleasing people, like we need this to reset us to the middle ground. The other thing I want to say with the saying no, it was when I wasn't self-aware, everyone else was very much aware of my nature. I just wasn't self-aware. So these people that were taking advantage knew that what would trigger me. So because I wanted to be known as a nice, kind, generous person, I would say yes and move people into my home, even though I knew this was a bad idea because I didn't want to look like a bad person. So then when they would continuously break boundaries and I would correct them, like for example, someone that had moved in my house was saying really mean and rude things to my oldest son, like really just hideous things. Like it's completely unacceptable. And when I corrected them, they're like, "You're a mean person, Mina." They knew that nothing would trigger me more than to be called mean when I'm actually trying to be overly seen as a nice, kind person by moving your homeless ass into my house. So they know exactly what things to do to trigger you into more of that. And so when you stop seeking this validation, when you just know who you are and you just exist on it. So now if someone was to tell me I'm mean, I would be like, if I was to go to a lion and say you're mean, he would just probably growl at me and I'd run. Right? Because like we know that's my energetic response. Like, yeah, you fucking better run then, right? So that's the kind of energy I want you to hold where they just skip you. These predators that can smell who to go after, I want you to be invisible to them.
Hmm. Oh my God. Yeah, I love that. It's like the words that someone might use against you, once you own them, they have no power over you. It's like, I mean, yeah, okay. Yep, I mean. And it's like, all right, no big deal. I really love that. I really love that. So I want to switch gears a little bit and turn to page 220 in the physical copy of the book, the chapter Wealthy Woman Era. So let me pull up to page 220. Here it is. I've got the whole book marked up with all kinds of notes. I'm gonna have to buy another one so I can have like a clean copy. All of my notes are in here, but I'm loving it. So this one paragraph in this on this page, I want to read about. And to me, this is where surrender really starts to come in. So once you have built that internal strength and that those layers of protection, then you surrender. I feel like once you have that in place, what I'm getting from your book is that once those things are in place, you have those boundaries, you have those values that are driving what you say no to, what you say yes to, then you can just surrender. So while the savage is like the masculine containers that you're creating in your life, then you can just release and let go because you know that those things are there to protect you. So let's dive into that a little bit. This is probably my favorite part of like some of the things that I've learned from you, like how to really just surrender to life and the various aspects of life. So let me start by reading this paragraph. You say, let me explain. I do not surrender to people, and I'll skip a couple of sentences, but I simply surrender. On a physical level, this means I drop my awareness from my mental plane, thoughts, logic, and reason, and move my awareness to my womb and cervix. From here, a new dimension opens up. Silence, intuition, faith, magnetism, and well, surrender. Once I'm here, I manifest from the raw materials of the quantum versus the dense plane of my mind. And I made a couple of notes a few pages later about the ways that you have surrendered, but the ways you also teach others to surrender throughout your book. And here are a few of them. Surrender to the having it all blueprint, the feminine blueprint, which to me is surrendering to nature, to human nature and your biological body as a woman. In regards to, and then the blueprint in general is like in regards to marriage, kids, career, and the timeline with which you can accomplish all of them so that you can have it all. You surrender to intuition, you surrender within mastering your craft, you surrender in your faith, and you surrender to your heart's desires. So I would love to dive a little bit into that. Why is it important now that you have all of those internal savage strengths in place? Why is it important to surrender when it comes to creating and manifesting the life of your dreams?
So it's important to surrender because it's just more profitable in every area of life. So I used to be in my masculine energy all the time where when you're in your masculine, you're more creating for what's already available. And you can get into, well, if there's only one of this and Eileen has it, well then how can I have it? Well, Eileen has it. Like there's always this logic, this rational, there's a certain number, there's like barriers and structures. That's just how the masculine realm works. And one isn't better or worse than the other. It's just how it is. Well, when I go into the feminine, which is the surrender part, where I'm in the womb space, the silence, I notice things, I hear things, I know of things that aren't necessarily manifested yet, but they're kind of the portals or the knowings. And so there's a very strong masculine side that I do have. I'm very results driven. Like I don't waste time doing things that aren't going to give me results because I'm like all human beings, we're materialistic. We actually like things to manifest here on earth. We don't just want to be in our Delulu where it's like virtual reality. Some people just like it in their thoughts. I like it
Mm.
here. Like I want to be able to hold it. Like I just don't want a soulmate in my thoughts. I want a husband here with me. I don't just want this money that I could like escape to. I like actually want it in my bank account and I should be able to use it. So I like results. And what I found is that when I surrender, when I go in, there's always something or someone whispering little directions to me. Go to Northwestern, study this. Don't study this, do this, turn right, listen to this book, read this, go here, don't do this, don't trust this person, launch this, say it this way. And if I'm in my head, I miss those nudges. And what I've learned is that those internal knowings, that voice, it you will think that it's coming from within you, but it's not coming from within you. It's actually this, it's quantum awareness. It's knowing of infinite possibilities and then which one you're being guided to based on your intentions and what you've been given as a desire. Those answers, those knowings are just so much more profitable in my life. And I like results. So if somehow logic and rational and creating what from the mental plane was more profitable, I would do that. I'm just a results driven person. I'm not favoring one over the other just for the sake of favoring one over the other. I just get more results doing it that way. And I've been able to replicate this with, with tens of thousands of people now. So there is something there internally. We hear it internally, but it's really coming from God, source, consciousness, whatever you want to refer to as the higher power. And it's always guiding us, always. We're just not listening because the mental plane is loud. It's louder.
Yeah, I relate a ton to you in terms of like being results driven and wanting to see, which is it's very interesting when you mention like having a physical copy of your work is it's different from having like the digital courses or the digital versions of, well, of course, like there's so many courses and so much in your courses, but having something be digital and something be tangible, it's very, very different. So I 100% relate to that. And those internal nudges, they're pure magic. And it's very interesting too, because when I think about like um, science and what has been studied so far, to me, like this is an area that I feel hasn't we haven't gotten there yet. And you do a lot more reading into like the science behind these things than I do right now. But I think about intuition and I wonder how much has that been studied? How much do we know about consciousness? How much do we know about the guidance that we receive from a scientific perspective? So that's to me like where the spirituality and science kind of intersect, where we're slowly learning more from a scientific perspective as to like what the spiritual realm looks like in a more tangible way. So that's what I get from your work. Like you're teaching us from a scientific perspective through the studies that you read, but you're leading us further into the spirituality aspect, which science will eventually catch up to, from my perspective. So I would love to talk about those internal nudges. I know for me personally, when I am too busy doing too much, I don't hear those nudges. They completely escape me, or I might hear them, but they're um, have a soft voice. So I completely just push them to the side and let the louder noise of the outside world take over. So for you, what is your favorite way of just allowing yourself to be available to hear those internal nudges and surrender to them?
So for me, it's been a compound effect where I started with just becoming aware of my senses first. And this was accidentally activated actually, because I would notice that when other people were eating food, like when I would go out to restaurants or whatever, having a meal with a family member or friend, they would say like, "Oh, I love like the paprika flavors," and I would eat like I've been homeless for 3 days and haven't eaten. Like I would just gulp down the food, and I was like, "How come these people?" Like it was just I was amazed that people could eat food and like and break apart the different flavors because I love food, but like I was gulping it down, like barely chewing it. So I wasn't tasting all the different flavors. And so that was like a very interesting awakening moment where I'm like, well, I want to know, like, I want to be able to taste the basil and the thyme and the paprika and all that stuff. And I realized that if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna have to slow down. Like that was the internal knowing. Like it's like don't like I had a friend years ago. Oh my God. She was like, I'm never gonna go to the restaurant with you again because it literally feels like I brought a homeless person the way you eat. And she's like, I'm embarrassed. So like that's how I used to eat. Like I was savage the way I would eat. So I'm like, okay, I'm enough science. I need to like slow down. So when I started slowing down my eating, I did start becoming aware that I liked my food more when I could smell it and I could touch it. And it awakened this like sensory world that I wasn't even aware of. And I started like engaging with things instead of just like moving past them. It's like, can I smell the rose, see the rose, feel the rose, and like really hear the rose, like really be with all of the thing. And so that was the first layer of it. And that forced me to, because in order to do that, you have to slow down. You have to be present. Well, that forced me to remove a lot of things from my life that were not allowing me to slow down and be present. So it was like this domino effect. And so from there, I started realizing a year in that I had developed this relationship with my intuition. So I was like, oh, more, please. I'd like to develop this more. And so the internal knowing was, well, ask me questions. Like, oh, okay. Well, what nail polish color should I get? What should I wear today? And I realized that every time this internal voice spoke, when I followed it, magic went unfold. And when I didn't, the day was kind of like ho hum. I'll like so simplest thing. Like sometimes I would get a nudge, wear green today, and I do it. And like magical things would happen. And sometimes it would say wear red today, and I would say, no, I really just want to wear green. And I started noticing because I was keeping a journal, I started noticing, oh my God, there's like it could it be that certain colors attract certain, bits of the morphogenetic field that the another color that day wouldn't attract. And it just became really clear to me that there was this interactive process. From that stage about, so everything you could see, like maybe it took me a year to embody, then the next one, then the next one. I started channeling. And that was a big gateway for me. I would say things and then hear myself saying them for the first time. And I would be like, how did I know? So when someone asked me a question, how did I know to say this? I've never read this before. I've never studied this. I've never even heard of this. And I would just know things. And then I would go and search for the answer, like scientifically, and I would be correct. And I'm like, oh my God, that is so weird. Like there's some part of me that knows things that I don't know, and it's always scientifically correct.
Mm.
So that's where that whole world of channeling opened up. I didn't even know the word channeling until like 2 years after I was actually channeling because I asked for more information and channeling was revealed to me. So it is this layered process, but it's this beautiful process. And like any relationship, it takes time to cultivate that relationship and that trust. I'm at that point now, Eileen, where I don't care what is happening or how crazy it sounds, I'm going for that internal nudge because everyone in my family knows this too. They ask me and I give them my answer, but I always say, ask yourself, like, what do you know? I'll validate it if that's what you need, but what do you know? Because you have that too. I'm not like some special snowflake that like has access to something that you don't have access to.
Mm. Oh, yes, I love that. And I see that perspective that you just mentioned in your work. Like when we ask you questions, sometimes you're like, go within. What if you were to ask yourself that question, what would you say? So I remember you did that for me in like the CEO Boss Queen, one of the recent sessions when I was going through a certain transition. And I asked you a question. You said, Eileen, what would your quantum self say to that? And that was a game changer too, because to me, it was like, okay, I can feel confident relying on my internal guidance. I can feel confident relying on the answers that come from within. So, but that requires an ability to surrender to those nudges, the ability to be still and to surrender to presence. So, to me, that's like such a beautiful teaching that you have. And of course, like you always say, inner work happens in layers. So creating and generating and developing that ability to listen in to your intuition, listen into that internal guidance. I know it takes years probably to develop if you have been conditioned out of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And enjoy the process. Like I know sometimes people can hear this and they're like, well, why I gotta wait 5 years? But it wasn't me waiting. It was me doing, but I was doing it on a smaller scale until it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But it all felt delicious as it was happening. I didn't even know there were next layers. When I
Mm,
was doing it, it was just like, oh my God, I can taste my food now. And then, oh my God, like I know exactly what to wear and what to like, do and where like so it was delicious at the moment, and then it just kept getting more delicious.
mm, mm. Interesting. So you get a little bit of the deliciousness, just a little taste if you are able to lean into it a little bit. The more you lean into it, the more you surrender into it, the more delicious it becomes. Interesting. I love that. It reminds me of like your container expansion work. It's like the depth. If you can more deeply lean into those nudges, more surrender more deeply, then the more you experience that deliciousness. I love
Absolutely. Yeah.
Love that. Okay, we are 50 minutes in, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. Ladies, if you have any particular questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as we are closing this conversation out. But I would love to know, Mina, is there anything that you want to share in terms of the book, in terms of being savage, in terms of surrendering that you want to share when it comes to like creating a life that you are super proud to pass your legacy down to the next generation?
I would say the first thing would be believing that you get to be the line breaker, and then working towards that versus worrying about the past or victimizing yourself or blaming other people. If there's people in your life to blame, study them and you'll learn key things. Maybe there'll be things what not to do. Like my mom, I studied her and realized what not to do in a lot of areas where she was taken advantage of, right? And so learn from people without going into victimhood and then apply it. But it really just starts with believing that you can have it in the first place.
Hmm. Believe that you can have it. Yeah, that takes time. That takes work. That takes a lot of work sometimes. Believing. I think that stops a lot of people in many ways. If you don't believe it, then you can't create it. You can't manifest it.
Right.
And
That's why I put that like core belief work in here because I'm like, if I'm not going to give them that, then nothing I say in this book will be something that they can apply.
hmm, right. And it's so funny because throughout the years, I feel like that's one of the main I'm I remember page 112, you mentioned it in one of your lives. That's where you can find the six-step process. But throughout many, many, many of your videos over the years, I hear you consistently referring back to that process. And you mentioned like you still use that process to this day. So to me, that means like this is really, really core work.
It really is. I was just using it yesterday for something that's like next level for me. So I was like, why won't I allow this? What in me thinks that I'm not worthy or prepared or whatever for this, right? So absolutely, it's foundational because if I'm not, it's like a weed, right? Like you keep snipping it, but the roots, like you gotta get it at the roots. So if
Mm,
there is a belief that's not gonna allow me to move forward, I have to go at the roots. A lot of people these days look for tips and tips is only get it's scratching the surface. You have to go at the roots. So don't ask me for tips, ask me for roots. It's the core beliefs.
mm. Yes, so, so, so good. Let's see what the ladies are saying. Thank you. Her personal transformation. Interesting. So someone mentioned maybe it's easier in the dreams at first to communicate with your unconscious. Oh, because a lot of the beliefs live in our unconscious subconscious. So it's interesting when you have those dreams, if you can tap into your subconscious and change things at that level, then you can create more in your life. Um, so Erica asks, uh, how do you view challenges in reference as the enemy in religion? Interesting question. I don't know if I can see the full question because there's a heart in the way. So let me send a quick message to get it out of the way.
Oh yeah, I hate how YouTube has that now because sometimes I can't read the full thing. I don't know why they haven't figured that out.
Right. It's like literally if I can expand the window, then hopefully it would go away, but nope, didn't. So her question's, how do you view challenges referred as the enemy in religion? The how,
That doesn't even register for me. It doesn't mean anything, so I wouldn't be able to answer that question. But in my life, I believe that everything is something I can solve, that there's always an answer somewhere. So I usually stay in solution consciousness. I don't even remember the last time I looked at something as a challenge. It's just like, please give me the solution. I just ask for the solution.
Yeah, and I'm reading back here. One thing that Amanda, the beautiful Amanda from Science and Magic, said was, I love the section on upgrading problems. Mina lists 4 to 5 problems total. It's a huge perspective shift. So it's really interesting how, like, in terms of challenges, if we view them from like, how can we upgrade our challenges in life, then that's probably the best way to view challenges.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, one person could think that a 20-minute drive somewhere is a challenge because of traffic, while, the person in the car next to them might be pondering, how can I make another $1 million? Or how can I solve cancer? So like upgrade your consciousness where you have bigger, better problems to resolve and to work towards. And so that's been a big thing for me because I come from a background of anxiety and overwhelm and panic attacks. And so every little thing was an issue in my life until I started like upgrading them and saying like I want it where certain things don't even register in my consciousness as a problem. And so I started going back again, I go back to evolution a lot because that's my background. And I was like, well, what were our like evolutionary problems that are registered in our DNA? And I realized it was very few. And a lot of the other stuff is just BS that we've plugged into and we think that they're problems, like other people's like opinions of our hairstyle or the fact that our mother-in-law loves our other sister-in-law more. Like, who the fuck cares? Like, what are you doing today? Like, what are you creating in your life, right? So I don't have problems like those.
Yeah, it reminds me of one thing you say. You have to get to the point where you outgrow those questions, where you outgrow those problems. It's like when we were toddlers and we were learning to tie our shoes for the first time. That's no longer a thing that even crosses our mind. We just do it and it's done. If you wear shoes with shoelaces on them. But it's
That's a
just
good
really,
analogy.
yeah, we no longer think about that. We just do it. Um, okay. Well, yes, thank you, Mina, so much for being here, for your time, for your energy. Mina and I are going to have another delicious, yummy conversation in January at the Incarnate event. So I'm really, really, really excited for that. Hopefully, some of you ladies will be there as well. Um, let's see. One more question came in. In the book, you mentioned not manifesting out, but you should manifest in. So when you spoke about Burkett, is it the same thing as outgrowing your problems?
They're just different techniques. Is it the same thing for you? Like that's what I would ask. Like it's okay if you put them in the same thing and you're like, "Oh, okay, well these go together." For me they're a little bit different techniques, but for me manifesting out is I'm trying to escape this situation versus where do I actually want to be? Because when we're trying to escape a situation, we end up in a different situation because we're just haphazardly running away versus like really creating from our full potential. So if it means the same to you, use it, run with it. These concepts I've given you, make them your own, use them, try them, add to them. Feel free to let go of ones that don't resonate. Like they're yours to play with.
Mm, they're yours to play with. Yes, I love that. You come to your life or you show up in your life with this energy of play, of experimentation, and you can do such great things from that perspective. Awesome. Yay. Thank you so much. All right. So we will end the live there. Mina, thank you so much for being here with us. And, it's funny. Sometimes I'm like, I feel like Mina has been my best kept secret for a really long time, but it's been just such a beautiful experience sharing you with like my friends and family, starting like sharing this live with them. So thank you so much for just the legacy you are creating for yourself, for your children, for women all around the world. You have changed my life in many ways, and I'm just very grateful for that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Eileen. It's been my pleasure and honor just watching you grow and evolve into this beautiful woman. And I can't wait to see what's next and meet you again in January. And thank you so much for having me.
Yes. All right, ladies, thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Bye.
Okay, so